Good morning, everyone. We're just going to wait a couple minutes.
I didn't misspell anybody's names, did I?
I think so.
Oh, we have some of our guests are already on. So can I move that so it's not always in the line? Oh. No. Is it snowing in the Finger Lakes right now?
Sure is.
It is.
Oh wow. We have nothing. We've gotten nothing. I'm shocked.
Carlo, I think we're ready to get started.
All right. I am Carlo DeVito, and I'm coming to you live from the home office in Catskill, New York. And welcome to New York Heritage, Heirloom, and Hybrid Wines with the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. So thank you very much. For those of you who, good morning, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, and this is a happy Tuesday. My name is Carlo DeVito, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a wine, beers, and spirits editor and author. And I've been editing wine, beers, and spirits books for more than 20 years. I hate saying that out loud. I'm also the former owner of the Hudson Winery and one of the founders of the Hudson Berkshire Beverage Trail and the Hudson Berkshire Wine and Food Festival. Some of the authors in my past were Kevin Israeli, Oz Clark, Matt Kramer, Tom Stevenson, Michael Jackson, the New York Times, the World Wine Guys, and a bunch of other good folks. I'm also the author, editor of East Coast Wineries blog that covers wines from Maine to Virginia. And I am also the creator and producer of the Great American Winery Stroop Waffle. If you haven't caught that, please go on over to the YouTube channel, Great American Winery Stroop Waffle, and you'll have some fun doing that. More importantly, though, I have much more esteemed guests here on our panel today. We have Brad Martz from White Cliff Vineyards. Wave so they know who you are, Brad. Kim Marconi and Paige Vincent, the winemakers from Three Brothers Winery. We have Dan Gobish, the winemaker at Fulkerson. And we have Cynthia West Chamberlain, the owner and winemaker at Black Willow Winery. And last but certainly not least, our good friend Peter Bell, the winemaker at Fox Run Vineyards. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, we want this conversation, first off, to be this seminar to be a conversation, not just between myself and the participants, but by everybody who's chiming in. And we really do want you to enter any of your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section so that we can make sure to get to your questions as we go through. The panelists, if I don't see a question you do, please holler out. Happy to have you interrupt me to make sure we answer as many questions in real time as possible. So please feel free to hit me upside the head. It's a hard head, you won't hurt it. I guess I have questions. We'd like to start off with some of the questions about that go along with this seminar. Firstly, do you work in the wine trade? Are there a lot of folks out there in the audience today that work in the wine trade? And then do you perceive New York wines to be of good value as compared to other American wine regions? That's an important question for a lot of folks. If you have any other metrics that you judge wine by, obviously taste, of course, is one of them, and quality. Please mention any of those other metrics as you would like. And of course, we have participants today here from the Finger Lakes and the Hudson Valley. So the theme of today's tasting is New York's heritage, heirloom, and hybrid grapes. And we're going to talk about a number of different regions and styles today that go along with that. I think we've got some really, really impressive wines in this tasting today. I think they are every bit as good as any of the other wines made in the region. I know that sometimes hybrids have a perceived disadvantage, but I think that's completely not true. And I think today's tasting really makes that statement. I'm going to talk a little bit about heritage and heirloom grapes, because I think there's been some confusion as to what they are. And I certainly received a number of texts and emails about those. And again, any of the participants here, please feel free to chime in and shut me up if I've said anything that you disagree with. But my real feeling is this: we started using the word heirloom when I was at Hudson Chatham, because our winemaker, Steve, is a grape historian as well as a wonderful winemaker. And his point was that, for example, in the Hudson Valley, there had been more than 2 or 3 dozen varieties that had been created and had been bred in the Hudson Valley 100 years ago that were perfectly good for using in winemaking, but had been discontinued for various reasons. And using modern understanding of winemaking, taking those grapes and bringing them back and making good wine with them. And doing that, we did 2 wines, an heirloom white and an heirloom red, where we took some of those old grapes that we that Steve was propagating and made an heirloom red and heirloom white blend. And there was grapes were like Empire, Iona, and a number of other older varieties that most people don't grow anymore. Certainly the vines are available, and in some cases they're not. And he also extended that to other states. I know he's propagated grapes from Massachusetts, etc. So when we talk about heirloom or heritage grapes, that's what Steve and I always used that rubric for. Some people may have tried to expand that understanding, but that was the original idea that we had. And as I said, a lot of people have been texting me or emailing me. Is there anybody who would like to add to that? Okay, so we'll let the crickets talk and we'll go on. All right, so one of the other things I really want to say is that I think that in some instances in the past, hybrids have been used to make less expensive sweet wines, while vinifera exploded here on the East Coast after Constantine Frank. And I think what we've seen in the last 10 years, especially last 5 certainly, is people going back and treating hybrid grapes like vinifera, both in the vineyard and in the cellar, and making some really stellar wines. And I think that's the benefit of today's tasting. And that's really one of I think the goals of this seminar is to showcase what some of these fine people are doing with hybrid grapes and making really quality wines. Okay, so I see we have a thank you for supporting our wines in our local restaurants. Certainly, I think these seminars are aimed at that. And I think these wines certainly are restaurant list worthy. And I think you'll find some really great ones at some great values here. Especially, I think there's some really wonderful wine that we're going to be tasting. I think that's that. And I think we're just going to move on to the first one. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dan Gobish from Fulkerson Winery, and you have your Vincent to start off with. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your production and go through. Fulkerson is a very well-established, respected winery in the Finger Lakes, and is a large supplier of juice to the rest of the state and beyond. You grow a number of vinifera as well as hybrids. If you could talk a little bit about your growing program, and then we'll move from there.
Sure. Thank you, Carlo. Like you said, my name is Dan Gobish. I have been with Fulkerson Winery this for 5 vintages now. I joined them in 2016 from North Carolina, so I'm not used to seeing snow falling out of the sky like it is today, but I've come to enjoy it. Fulkerson has been, like you had mentioned, has been around for quite some time. They just celebrated their 30th year of being a winery. We have approximately 105 acres of grapes that we grow. That is split between both vinifera, hybrids, and natives as well. When I was just doing a rough count, it seems that we grow about 24 different varieties. The vinifera are about a dozen, and then the natives and the hybrids, we also have about a dozen of those. Today, I'm pleased to show off our 2019 Vincent. A little bit about the Vincent Grape itself. It was developed in the Vineland Research Station up in Ontario. It's actually got 7 different varieties, or species rather, of grapes in its parentage, so it has quite a convoluted heritage that you go back to. It is a Teinturier grape. It's grown a lot for its super dark red color. It can be used in blending, where it's often used up in Canada for that. We have chose to make it a varietal. And the inspiration for that came actually from one of our home winemakers. Fulkerson actually started as a juice plant. And so over the years, we've got several thousand juice customers. And a few years ago, well, actually quite some years ago, I'm not quite sure exactly on the date, one of the home winemakers brought in a dry Vincent and presented it to Sarah Fulkerson, our owner, who was so impressed with it that he brought it on into the winery and saw that he could actually develop it as a varietal standing alone on itself. We have planted about 3 acres of the grapes ourselves. It's grown on its own roots in a gravelly soil base. It was planted in about 2001, so we're going on about our 20th vintage. It's never been replanted. We've found it to be quite hardy. The literature tells you it's good down to -15, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's down, proven to be a little hardier, even past that. We grow it on umbrella style trellis, and we cane prune it every year, so it does get treated like a vinifera, and that is just not gone along and hedged. We take the time to prune it correctly. We crop it at about between 4 and 6 tons an acre, and over our 3 acres, we'll typically harvest 15 to 20 tons in a given average year. As far as disease goes, it's not susceptible to a lot of the standard downy mildew, botrytis, things that we have seen. It's got a nice loose cluster to it. So once in a while, you'll have a little incidence with powdery mildew, but that can easily be incorporated in your spray program. So I would definitely call it a lower intervention grape. Basically, it's been pretty much trouble-free. Like I said, we get about 15 to 20 tons a year. We bring it in at about 16 to 19 degrees Brix. Typically about the 2nd week in October is when it's ready for harvest. Like I said, the Brix is usually about 16 to 19, and the acidity is somewhere around 9 to 11 grams per liter when it comes into the winery. Portion of that is immediately cold pressed, being such a dark grape in itself. We go ahead and press it right after it comes off of the vineyard, and the color is no problem. We then float clear the juice and we offer it up for sale to our home winemakers in our juice plant throughout the year. We typically keep about 6 to 8 tons for ourselves for use in the winery. That is fermented traditionally on the skins, just like any other red wine is done. Bringing in at 16 to 19 grapes, we usually chapitalize it up to about 23, so we can get some alcohol into the wine. We do several things along the way to try to keep the acidity in check as much as possible. One of those things being we use an malic reducing yeast strain, typically 71B or ICV GRE, something like that, trying to eat up some of that acid to kind of get that in control early on. We do a warm ferment, typically in the mid 80s. It's pressed early, about 3 to 4 bricks, sugar remaining in it, and we find that keeps some of the fruit. We want to have a real fruit forward, easy drinking wine, so we like to press it a little bit young. It does undergo malolactic fermentation over the winter. In fact, it's happening right now as we speak. After that, it'll be cold stabilized. And again, those are all methods to try to get that acid under control. We're going to drop it with the yeast. We're going to drop some acid in our malolactic, and then we're going to get a little bit more of it out during the cold stabilization process. Then we age it for about 3 months or so in stainless steel with some French oak adjuncts added in there. Right before bottling, we'll adjust the RS to about 4 grams per liter, and it's typically bottled in the late summer of the year following. So we'll be bottling up this year sometime in the late July or August of next year, right before harvest. We do it under screw cap. Keep underneath. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, it was under screw cap. Just keep everything easy, and the majority of our wines are bottled that way today. Did you have a question, Carlo?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, look, number one as a wine, it's a really soft, lush wine. It's got a lot of big fruit up front, lots of cassis and cranberry, dark cherry, really, really pretty. And the soft tannins make it a super easy wine to drink. I was going to ask you, what do you? It's very, very approachable. Charlois or Charlois, whichever you prefer the pronunciation of, is one of the parents. So it's got that nice soft cherry that comes from that. What do you folks suggest for pairing it with in terms of food?
I think it would be a good meal to eat today in the snow. Anything like a heavy, rich stew, maybe with some beef or lamb in there, some nice gravy sauce. I think that the lightness of the wine and the acidity would go real well with anything with a heavy sauce to it. On the back of the label, you see we do include some pairings, and we've got the little beef and the lamb on there. And that's pretty much what I tend to agree with that as well.
All right, so we have some questions from the crowd. So by the way, for people who ask, where does the name Vincent come from? It is not Vincent Price. It comes from Saint Vincent, who was the patron saint of Burgundy, which is where the name Vincent comes from. And it was suggested by the owner at Bordy, Philip Wagner. That was the man who suggested the name Vincent, one of those little tidbits of stupid stuff that I know. A question for you, Dan. One of the first questions was, is 19 bricks commonly where Vincent kind of maxes out? Or is that just where you pick it?
Even this year, which was a very ripe year for us here in the Finger Lakes, we kept an eye on it, and we're watching angering, and I think it actually came in at just slightly over 19. I think it was about 19 and a half by the time we got it in. With my experience, like I said, I've only been in the Finger Lakes for 5 years, so I can't speak from a lot of experience, but this has been the ripest year that I've seen, and it was just, like I said, just slightly over 19. So that would say to me that that's probably about the end of it.
And do you do any additional tannin adds to it?
No, we do not.
Or
No,
treatments?
no, there's no exogenous tannins added to it at all.
Okay. And somebody suggested that they think this would go great with a charcuterie board. Couldn't agree more. I think it's a great food wine. I think it's a really wonderful wine. It's not a grape that people see a lot on its own. Do you use a fair amount of it? Do you use any of it for blending as you go through with some of your other wines?
We do. We use it to touch up the color, maybe in some rosés or in especially light year. Yes, and
Yeah, but
it does
Vincent's a very
quite a bit.
popular yes.
Yeah, a little goes
Yeah.
a long way with Vincent.
Yeah, a little goes a long ways, right? Okay, I think we're going to be right. Dan, I can't thank you enough. Not to cut you short, but we do have a time frame I'm supposed to keep. And I think we're near that. Anybody have any other questions for Dan while we're here? Any of our panelists or any of you folks out in the audience? Oh, does O-Pee-Chee carry this varietal, by the way?
They do.
Okay, so it's not a tasting room only wine.
Oh, no, it is available through a Peachy family. Mhm.
Very good, very good. All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next person. Next up in our order is White Cliff Vineyards. We have the Vidal Blanc, and the winemaker is Brad Martz. And Brad and I know each other well. I'm sure we've spent way too many days tasting wine together. So Vidal Blanc, for those of you who don't know, is a cross between Vinifera and Ungi Blanc, also known as Trebbiano Toscano, and another hybrid variety, Rayon d'Or, which is a sable variety. The grape was developed in the 1930s, and it was made, originally bred in France for cognac. They wanted something that was a little bit more disease resistant, and it's got great winter hardiness. But I'm going to ask Brad to tell us a little bit about White Cliff Vineyard and what they're growing there, because they've got one of the coolest vineyards in the Hudson Valley, and certainly one of the coolest actually in New York State. And they grow a lot of different things. So Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about the winery and what you're growing overall, and then we'll go to the Vidal Blanc.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks again, Carlo. Appreciate it. And just say hello to everyone. Yeah, like Carlo said, my name is Brad Martz. I'm the winemaker at White Cliff Vineyard and Winery. We're based in Gardner, New York, of course, in the Hudson Valley. We are we've been a winery that's been around for about 20 years. Actually, last year was our 20-year anniversary. I've been the winemaker at White Cliff for about 8 years. I've been with White Cliff about 10 years total, but I've been the winemaker there since about 2012. The vineyard at the home estate in Gardner is about 26 acres planted with about 50/50 vinifera and hybrids. We also have another beautiful vineyard up in Hudson, New York, where it's 10 acres of all vinifera plantings up in Hudson. We also have a vineyard in Middle Hope down by Newburgh, which is our sparkling production facility or vineyard. And we do a lot of work with other orchards and different vineyards as they're getting started here in the Hudson Valley. We work with them very closely. Basically, we help them get started. We help them plant. We help them get their vineyard up and running. And during the process, we purchase all their grapes from them, so that it gives them incentive to continue on with growing that vineyard. And that's another reason, or that's another way we're able to get the amount of grapes that we get, because our goal is to have Hudson Valley, as much Hudson Valley grapes as possible. And that in particular is from this Vidal Blanc. We have about 24 different varietals planted currently at White Cliff at the estate vineyard. Of course, we're trying to whittle those down. A lot of that was still a lot of strange varietals that came out as experimental varietals. Like we have an old Cornell varietal called New York 84. And that's one varietal we still have planted there, even though we're looking to sub that out. We have some others like Moray, many, of course, we have Saval planted, we have Vigneault planted, we have Vidal Blanc planted. So a number of different hybrids planted at that site that we're just trying to figure out which works best in the current vineyard, because our particular site gets down. It's one of the coldest sites in the Hudson Valley as well. So where we're located in a bowl. So what happens is all the weather from the Gunk Mountains come in, and it basically sits right on top of our vineyard during the coldest times of year. And for example, in 2019, which is where this wine is from, we had one of those nights where it was that horrible 2018 year. Things didn't really harden off because the way the situation was, and we got a night where it was down to almost -20. And so that ended up almost wiping out our entire vineyard during for that cold. And so what we did is we were able to get a little bit out of the vineyard, but because of our partnerships with other vineyards in the Hudson Valley, we're able to get enough of the grapes like this Vidal Blanc to really supply what we needed. And so that's one of those tricks of or that's one of those problematic types of things we have in the Hudson Valley is the difference. We have great growing degree days to get things up nice and ripe, but we also have the very cold winters, so that we have to really watch out for. Everything is VSP trained. We do everything the same, whether it be vinifera or hybrids. So it's all cane pruned. In the vineyard, we treat everything the same. Everything's on the same spray schedule. Everything is done exactly the same way with the hybrids that we do with the vinifera grapes. On the wine itself, I guess jump right into that. Again, this is a mixture of some of our grapes with a predominant amount of grapes from another vineyard in the Hudson Valley, but it is 100% Hudson Valley fruit. What we do is when we harvest it, I typically harvest, and in this one in particular, it was a full berry. It was full berry in the press. It's pressed off. I press to at most about 1 bar of pressure. So I'm taking primarily free run and removing the hard press and having that being used in other wines. So it's really focusing on the best that we can produce and the best juice that we can get out of this. This particular was then settled and put into barrels. So it was barrel fermented. It was barrel fermented for about 3.5 months total. During that time, it was also put through malolactic to drop the acid down. As we had talked, if you know about Vidal, the great thing about Vidal is that you can get the Brix levels nice and high, typically. So on average, we're getting around 21 Brix, but on good years, we can get it up to 23 and still have the acid within a reasonable amount. I like to have an acid kind of target range around 9 TA, so that if I need to play around with it with the malolactic, I can bring it down a little bit, but I like that target range of around 9, especially when you can barrel ferment it and put it through ML, because the high alcohol, the barrel, and the ML all adds complexity, a little bit more complexity to the mid palate and the finish palate to give it something drinkable and not just, total acid hitting you in the face, even though part of that is what I like.
I have a couple of questions from the field real fast. Do your hybrid grapes require the same spray schedule as your vinifera, even because you were saying that you treat them the same, you give them the same spray schedule? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Do they have to? Probably not. They could probably go without our vineyard, everything is mixed in. So you'll have, everything is not split out as well as you would of course like it. So you have vinifera right up against hybrids. And just from a efficiency standpoint, it fits within the schedule to spray, and they're right beside each other. So it just makes a lot more sense just to do everything within that same spray schedule. That just because it makes the most sense to do it that way.
And depending on the vinifera, it could be a disease vector in some
Exactly.
ways.
If you have a vinifera right beside the hybrid, and that was the problem, then, or a hybrid. I mean, Vidal is a really nice one, but you have some hybrids that are also very susceptible to disease that you want to make sure that are sprayed and they're not spreading it into the others. So yes, they typically stay on the same schedule anyway.
One of the questions was, some winemakers tend to treat Vidal like Riesling, but it sounds like you take a different approach. Have you done a stainless steel / no barrel style as well?
Yes, I've done both. Typically the stainless steel, on this one in particular, I was going for something a little more round. The stainless steel is pretty direct. It's pretty really straight ahead, straightforward. And I also like to do stainless steel if it comes in a higher Brix. Like this Brix was around 21, but the stainless steel, if I can get up to about 23, because then the alcohol will create that mid palate balance, or they create that kind of longevity, where I think with it's a little bit lower, the oak really, not necessarily oak, because you're not really getting integration because it's more of a neutral type of oak. So it just adds the layers, it adds a complexity to it, just with that micro-oxygenation during the fermentation process, that it really kind of helps that. So
well, I think the wine is spectacular. I think it's a really high quality white wine. It's got beautiful flavors to it. Really, really impressive wine, no question about it. Do you find that do you find that there are any drawbacks to working with Vidal? How long do you let your Vidal hang? And when you're bringing it in, does it present any other problems that other grapes don't?
Honestly, Vidal is really pretty easy to work with. It's the key is just getting it to the right numbers that you're looking for, like if you can get the Brix levels high enough, and then get the acid levels low enough that you can, for a dry wine. Now, of course, I think someone brought up with making any late harvest or any sweet, that typically it's made for sweet wine. So having that really high acid is great. So
Right.
there's no problem. But I kind of wanted it more for a dry. So having something a little bit lower in acid level. But you also have to watch with Vidal, because if you let it hang too long, it won't stop with Brix. Like sugar will just keep going, because we've also brought it in a couple times where it was like 24, 25 Brix. And then you're talking about acid levels alcohol levels where you're getting up to like 15.
Yeah.
So, and that's not something I really want for white. So you have to watch out with that. So kind of targeting if you can get in the 22, 23 range for Brix, makes the most sense for us in our program. But it's really easy. It's typically really disease resistant. The only issue we can have with letting it go too long is, of course, we have a lot of bird issues. So a lot of bird pressure. So then when the birds start attacking it, they'll start nipping the skins. The skins are thick, so they're usually resistant. But as soon as birds start plucking it, sour rot loves to jump in there.
Oh yeah, it's an easy sour rot.
Yeah, so then you're playing with that. So trying to keep it clean. But overall, it's pretty easy to work with.
Well, it's a beautiful, beautiful wine. It's a really elegant wine. Is there any food matches that you folks particularly recommend with this wine?
I think for me, it's a lot of the, kind of the standards when you're looking there, like roasted chicken type of things. Roast duck, I think, is pretty nice because you have all the fat of the duck, and then you have this, because this is pretty
really
nice and acid. It has that minerality type of thing. So I think it kind of cuts through that really nicely. And foie gras would be.
Thank you for that suggestion. That's an excellent one.
Yeah, absolutely. And any hard cheeses, those are usually good with this as well. So I would say those are great pairings for it.
Well, fabulous, fabulous wine. I mean, again, it's very restaurant worthy in that respect. Great food wine, and is just a terrific wine. Well, thank you very much. It's time to move on to the next wine, and the next wine is the Stony Lonesome from Three Brothers. The winemaker, head winemaker, is Kim Marconi, and Paige Vincent is also the winemaker. So we've got the team here for Three Brothers, and this is now this is a fantastic wine, a really unique wine, and we're definitely going to let Kim talk about this. This is a Valvin Muscat Sur Lie, and so this is something really, really unique, and I'm going to ask Kim to start us off, talk a little bit about the grape, and then tell us where the idea for this wine came from.
Yeah, sure. So this is, we have Valvin on the property, and it actually came about of an accident. We use this wine in the typically more sweetened options for our two other houses. So Three Brothers has 3 wine houses on site. One being the Stony Lonesome Wine House, which is dry vinifera, estate-based. And then we have 2 other sites that are sweeter and perhaps not for everyone. But the Valvin is typically used in sweet iteration. When Paige and I started in 2018, we had a little extra that didn't settle well. And we decided that we needed to do something with this. We couldn't let it go. So we wanted to do something higher end, but we didn't want to do it sweet. And all of this floral and fruit we feel like needed mid palate. So we wanted to build that in with using Sur Lie. So we did that in 2018 under our pilot series, and that was great, and it went over really well. So now it is in our standard lineup for Stony Lonesome. And I don't know if Paige wants to talk about 2019 specifically.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. I'm just trying to step away a little bit so we can avoid any reverb. So we're far enough away. So bear with me. Yeah, so 2019, which is the wine that you have in front of you, of course, as most other areas in the state, the vintage was a high acid year. And, we knew from our experience of 2018 that working with some lees contact with this variety was a successful way to build up that palate without having to rely as heavily on sugar specifically. So this wine tops out at about 10 grams per liter RS. After processing, the wine itself sees fairly standard processing. So crushed, destemmed, pressed. The juice is then settled per usual and fermented in stainless steel. Where we really start to, see some differences is by extending that lees contact. So for about 8 or 9 months, we will weekly stir the lees back through the wine and let that resettle out and try and build up that texture a bit. So that's part of, Kim alluded a little bit to how this started in our pilot series, and just as a little offshoot, and it did well enough to graduate into the standard lineup. So it's fun for us. We have about 1.1 productive acres on the vineyard right now, and it crops pretty high at about this past year. I think it came in at about 9 tons an acre. And then we actually have another 1.4 acres planted that's due to come online next year, just to help build in this program for this wine, but as some of our other uses for it as well.
So
I saw a question.
Go ahead.
Just regarding barrel use, no, we don't actually put this through any sort of barrel use at all. And we leave that little bit of CO2. We like that tiny bit of spritz to it, in addition to kind of filling up the palate with the lees contact. So.
Okay, and was there another question down there? I thought I saw, or any barrel use. This is a relatively new hybrid, right? I mean, this was only released by Cornell in 2005, and it does have Muscat in its background. It was crossed with another Muscat de Moulin, which is also a hybrid. So, how is it in the field in terms of growing?
So they have it on high wire cordon, and they treat it like a hybrid, which is kind of nice for them. It's a little more hands off while still giving us some of the prettiest fruit. And also, I don't know if anyone has eaten Valvin right out of the field, but it is like Trix cereal. It's delicious.
And does it require a lot of leaf pulling or anything like that, or is it just easy to grow?
Pretty easy to grow, according to our vineyard manager. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And somebody, Peter says that's a much better grape than Muscat. No, Peter, would you like to chime in on that? I'd love to hear that point. No.
Unmute. Yeah. I had to unmute myself, but I used to make Muscat Autumnal and against my better judgment. I never liked the stuff. We all have to do that once in a while. And this one has some clarity to it, this grape. And I've actually never tasted it in a dry style, and I really like this stuff. So
It's a really astonishing wine.
And that was part of the fun for it on our end was, the pilot series gives us a really fun opportunity to, to play with wines and styles that we might not typically, we don't have to, be guaranteed that it's going to sell or that other people are going to like it. But for us to be able to toy with something in 1 year and then have it immediately graduate into the standard Stony offerings is fun. We're big proponents of hybrids, being utilized for, fine wine production. This year we worked with Chamberson, which we have in our normal lineup as a red wine, a sweeter red wine. This year we did a barrel fermented dry rosé, which we're very excited about. So we're having fun taking the opportunity, I think, to work with these varieties in slightly different iterations.
Well, this was a shocker, and you got a great review from the Cork Report for the pilot series version of this wine. How's the response been in the tasting room?
Pretty good overall. I mean, pilot series is a hand sale, so that is its own challenge.
Right.
And people don't know what it is exactly. And there's a lot of Moscato. Oh, sweet Moscato. And you're like, no. But I think it's worth the hand sell.
It certainly is to me. I mean, it's just shockingly good. And I don't mean that in any kind of negative way, but you're right. One sees Muscat and they think instantly this is going to be a dry wine.
Absolutely.
I think that Americans are trained in that way, although I don't think it's really quite true in Europe. But here, this wine is absolutely spectacular.
Thank you. And case production is still small. We got a question on that. So we have about 180 cases of the 19. And we did even list it was like maybe 60 of the 18.
And what was the case production on this wine?
Yeah, 182.
182. Okay, so it's still pretty good size.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there? I got to tell you, this is just a fabulous drinking wine. I have to say one of the biggest shocks of the whole thing. And I have to say, Len talked it up big time to me before I got my bottle. And I thought, okay, well, it's Len. We'll discount that. It was excellent. It really was. It's great. I have the mic. You can't answer back. Is there anything else that you folks want to talk about your wine? Is there anything else you want to add? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I was just going to address Julio's question. I think that's a little bit easier to address verbally. We currently self-distribute, so we don't work through a distributor at this point, but we are going down the route of trying to secure or work toward New York City distribution in the coming year. But for now, we do have it available and have it in our wholesale. And so, you can feel free to contact us or the winery, and we're happy to hook you up with whatever you need going forward.
I have to say, I think this would be a tremendous food wine. To me, this is a great restaurant wine to really knock the socks off with people with. It really, really is. Oh, recommended food pairings. I'm sorry, I missed all that. Did we talk about that?
No, but we we were talking about fruity and earthy things when we were thinking about food pairings with this. So we had talked about maybe poached pears and blue cheese, or like orange chicken, something that has savory and fruit.
Definitely, it goes nicely with maybe not heat necessarily, but Asian Thai flavors. Anything that's going to bring that kind of that sort of spice focus with a bit of a fruit flair to it is nice.
Well, it's just a tremendous wine. Any other questions from out there? No, I think we're good. All right, and I do think it is time to move along. So, guys, thank you very much. Awesome wine. Thank you very much. A real nice surprise.
Thank you.
And next is the infamous and renowned Peter Bell from Fox Run Vineyards, and we're going to taste his Tramanet. Tramanet is a cross of the French-American hybrid from Johannes Sev and the German Vitis Vinifera cultivar Gewurztraminer. So it's a really wonderful grape with lots of distinct flavor and a very big nose. This is grown. It's being grown in a number of places now. It's gaining in traction, and I'm seeing it more and more. Just having been out to the West Coast, I saw more Tramanet than I thought I would. I really was fascinated by this. Peter, I have a long question for you to start off with. You grow a number of other vinifera. Why don't you talk a little bit about Fox Run, about what you grow, and then I really want to talk about Gewurztraminer and Tramanet. But let's talk about Fox Run and what you're growing there.
Okay, I'm on, right? So we do not grow this grape. We buy them from a very renowned grower on Keuka Lake. Yeah, there you go. There it is. So most of you who've seen these maps from space of the Finger Lakes know that there's one like aberrant lake that has a Y shape rather than like a finger shape, and we love it nevertheless. So that little stick of land that sits, I didn't say shits, sits down in the middle of the two, in the Y, is called the Bluff. And they've been growing grapes there for 150 years. And if you see photos from the, late 1800s, there's no trees at all. It's just all grapes. And the fascinating thing is that there were no roads back then. And vineyard workers and people who wanted to get the grapes out of there to make into wine had to take ferries from either Hammondsport or Grangeport or Penn Yan at the top tips of the lakes and get off at a landing. And that's why we have so many places called Somebody's Landing around here. And then walk up into the vineyards and work in the vineyards, pick the grapes, etc. They weren't Tramanet back then, they were other native grapes. But it's a really cool place to grow grapes. And if you really pick your site, you can actually have a southern exposure, which is very rare indeed here, because most of our grapes are grown on western slopes or eastern slopes. But if you look at a map, you can see some vineyards that actually face south. And that's a great way to capture sunlight and heat, as we all know, which we want to do. So this grape is grown by Darren Simmons Vineyard, been around since the 1960s. And they were originally established to sell table grapes to people and also native and hybrid grapes to Taylor Wine Company. And everybody had to rejig everything when Taylor Wine Company went out of business. So they replanted and listened to winemakers who were asking for certain grapes and asking for other certain grapes to be yanked out of the ground. And I won't name them, but Tramanet was one of the ones that we all lobbied for. So what about Tramanet? Tramanet's a pretty interesting grape. As we all know, Gewurztraminer is probably the most polarizing wine in the world.
That's not true at all. It's a great grape, and the rest of you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what. There you go. So he just fell into my trap. Most of us love Gewurztraminer, but it's a really hard sell around the world. And not only that, it's really hard to grow, right? So it's a very vigorous grape. And if you want to do it around here, you have to invoke things like a double canopy growing system, like the Scott Henry, to divide the canopy into an up and down kind of architecture. You have to net the grapes because birds, foxes.
Question was, can you speak up? Can you speak up or closer to your mic?
Okay, sorry. Maybe everybody didn't hear anything I said.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Gewurztraminer, you have to be very purposeful in your growing. And many people are not prepared to do that. The vineyard input versus the cost of the price you can charge for the wine is not a very good ratio. So it costs us $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 a ton to grow Gewurztraminer, and we can only sell it for like $20. Not a really good metric. So enter Tramanet. Tramanet has some interesting qualities that don't constitute a compromise. In fact, they get rid of many of the bad things about Gewurztraminer, the polarizing thing, the difficulty in growing, and they make it make a whole lot more sense in terms of growing it and making it into wine. So what about Tramanet? Yeah, one of its parents is Gewurztraminer. The other one is like breeding stock, like horse semen or something. And
Yeah.
What this brings to the game is higher acid, ripeness at lower sugar levels, no need to skin contact the grapes, as part of the winemaking process. Birds don't particularly go for them, and you can be almost indifferent in terms of your grape growing. I'm being a little bit kind of provocative here, but the old style grape growing where you get a huge number of shoots up on some support wire and let them go crazy, so that you have a very deep canopy, very little exposure of the grape clusters to light and air, et cetera, actually works better. Isn't that weird? So some of us have wondered, since it's so easy to grow and since it's so easy to make into a wine using kind of laissez-faire grape growing and moderately intense winemaking, what would happen if we actually treated it as a vinifera grape, i.e. did a VSP canopy, et cetera, some shoot positioning, et cetera? And the answer is it actually doesn't make a better wine. Hans Walter Peterson told me this. They tried it, and not only is it a waste of time, but the wines made from grapes grown more aggressively are less appealing. So I was thinking of posting a picture of how these grapes are grown, but it would be quite embarrassing because we have like 20 leaf layers before you see grapes. It's a really ugly canopy. And
Do you do leaf pulling as you go through the season?
what?
Do you do any leaf pulling or combing during the season?
No, and our grower actually tried that. He did some pulling in the fruit zone, which is all over the place anyway. And we made wine out of it, and we did not prefer that wine.
Huh.
But isn't that crazy? So let's get to winemaking. I think I'm running out of time. With Gewurztraminer, skin contact is like the way to draw out some of the key flavors that indicate that it's Gewurztraminer, which is fine, but you have to really be careful with that, and you have to start with cold grapes, etc. And you have to be careful of a phenolic extraction. In the case of Tramanet, just crush and press. No skin contact. The grapes themselves are mildly pink, but not really that pink. And so conventional white wine approach to turning grapes into wine. And then typically this wine, after we stop the fermentation, which is by chilling with somewhere around 15 to 20 grams of sugar. I've been playing around with sugar levels a little bit, but that's where I'm settling. The wine becomes really unappealing. Like, where were all those flavors during the fermentation showed us? They kind of disappear for a while. And if you are a kind of entry-level winemaker, you might be tempted to panic and say, I did something wrong. But sure enough, by April or May or June, some of those monoterpenes and other flavor compounds reemerge to the point where you say, why was I panicking at all? So this, it's an ugly duckling kind of wine. And
You're selling this really well. It's a beautiful wine, by the way. It's got lovely aromatics. It's got some lovely tropical fruits. It's got a little hint of petrol to it. It's absolutely spectacular.
well, thanks, Carlo. And if you're on board here, you could taste this and you go, okay, any food, this gets me out of food wine pairing recommendations. Anything that works with Riesling works with this wine.
Yeah, this is it's kind of Riesling-esque as well. So it's got all the great attributes of both, I think.
Thanks. Yeah, pre-dinner drink right through to most foods. And we all like Asian food, so this works very well with that. It can stand some chili heat. Another wonderful thing about this is that the alcohol is not particularly high. We're in the high 11. And that's one of the downfalls of Gewurz is when you're trying to match Gewurz with spicy foods, the alcohol really becomes really jarring. And we never have to touch the acid up or down on this stuff. Gewurztraminer has, one of the things about Gewurztraminer which polarizes people is the low acid. And this one has not only higher acid, but lower alcohol, much more consumer friendly.
It's got great complexity. It's got great balance. It's light. It's just absolutely delicious. It's got great aromatics. It's a wonderful wine for any restaurant that sells a lot of Riesling. This is certainly a wine that belongs on that list. And it's a great dry. It's not fully dry, but it's certainly not super sweet in any way, shape, or form. I wouldn't even call it a semi-sweet.
So I have a question for Paige. Why am I underselling this wine?
Totally not a question, just a comment. I feel like
Peter, it's a great wine.
I apologize for it.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it's worth noting. Like Tramanet can be pretty hard to come by in the Finger Lakes too. It's pretty sought after, and there's not a great deal of it planted. So, you do a great service to it for what there is planted.
I'm trying to make one of those parts. There you go.
It's a terrific wine. Brad, you also make a Tramanet, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And do you find it easy to work with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's we do it a little bit differently than, like I said, everything's on VSP. So I'd be curious with Peter, do you think, because I noticed like ours has a lot more of that, I guess I always trouble with the lychee type of smell, whatever people consider that. So this is much more similar to like a Riesling type of smell to me. Do you think it's because of the way it is, the way you do vinify, or it's in the vineyard, the way you let it just kind of grow? Is that the reason why?
Wow, very good question. And the answer is I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you skin contact yours?
No, it's all, no, it's the same way. It's just in and pressed out right away. And I mean, we treat it like, cool ferments, 60-degree ferments. And so same way, but it has a different, just that aroma is just a bit different.
Yeah, to be honest, I could make something up, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
This is pretty mainstream winemaking, maybe a little warmer than you do,
Mm-hmm.
but no skin contact. I treat it exactly the way I treat Riesling. So there's Epernay 2 yeast.
Okay.
Fermentation. I'm not into long drawn out fermentation, so it's over usually by Halloween.
Oh,
It's got a lot of nice fresh fruit to it, really does.
Yeah, and treating it, Carlo, with you as well, because you also have to watch. Like, I like the fact that we can actually bring it in a little bit earlier. You don't have to. We're not chasing bricks on it, and we've seen that if you actually do chase bricks on it, it's worse because the acid drops out of it like that. So
I think there's several white grapes that are like that. Like I always say, let's just take the acidity because you're going to want that in the wine. You want to have that nice freshness that you're looking.
Yeah.
Well, Carlo, that's a very good point because this is one of the wonderful things about hybrids is that they're flavor ripe at relatively low bricks. So we have this uncoupling of sugar accumulation and flavor accumulation, which we all want around here. So, we don't, with Gewurztraminer, you need 23, 24 before flavor compounds kick in.
Yeah.
And with Tramanet 2021 is just fine. And we've had some comments about other grapes or along the same lines. And that's a really great asset, along with the fact that we get the tons per acre that make sense for growers as well.
One of the questions out there is, how would you describe the difference between your Tramanet and Riesling?
You could pour a glass of each side by side and see some profound differences, but they're in the same family, and that's partly the winemaking, but also the grape similarity. The acid levels are generally the same. Alcohol levels are generally the same. Sugar levels are up to the winemaker. I don't think I would go ahead and ferment a wine like this one drier than it already is, because I think it would lose some of its charm. And we have some really good research from Cornell about interrupted fermentations locking in flavor compounds versus going dry and say back sweetening. It literally, as you take a wine dry, you are losing aromatic compounds which cannot be recaptured. So that's one of my reasons for grabbing a wine at a certain sugar level to lock in some of those flavor compounds.
All right. Anything else that you wanted to say, or any other questions out there? Peter, as always, thank you very much. Always fun to have you on one of these panels, and I always love talking to you. So always great. Always learn something when I speak with Peter. The next wine that we have is from Black Willow, and Cynthia West Chamberlain is the owner and winemaker there. Hello, how are you?
Hi, everyone.
Today we're going to be tasting Diamond, the Estate Diamond, and this is a dry wine. So this is the Diamond grape. For people who don't know, is a grape that's a cross between Concord and Iona. Certainly, Steve Castles, the grape historian, has written a whole, I don't want to say a chapter, but quite a bit on the Iona grape, as it was originally developed in the Hudson Valley. So he's always about that. But Diamond traditionally has a big grapey nose. This is a really unique idea because certainly in the Finger Lakes, Diamond is a fairly popular grape that's used for a lot of blending, and it's normally done with a sweet wine, but you've gone dry here and you've created something really unique. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your winery and then why you decided to make this wine.
Okay, well, it's a tough act to follow with Peter there, but I'm going to try. Blackwell Winery was founded in 2010, so we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And we sit right on the south shore of Lake Ontario between Rochester and Niagara Falls, USA, in the Niagara, USA region. The winery here has 43 acres, all sandy loam, really great drainage going right to the lake, where our property just ends like 200 feet from the water. The Diamond grapes are the only ones that we grow currently. We planted them just 5 years ago, and we've actually had 2 harvests now. I had made Diamond in the sweet version up until 2 years ago, when I said, this grape really has a lot of nose to it. It has a lot of nice acidity to it. It's got, it just is so unique and different. Why don't people make it dry? Being new into the whole winemaking and everything myself, I thought, well, why not? So I tried it. We hand pick everything. We have minimal spray. We have it on the umbrella canopy, of course. And we don't spray the ground cover at all. We use mowers in between, so less spraying. And so I decided to go ahead and treat this, like a Sauvignon Blanc. And
okay, so I'm going to ask a quick question because I'm looking at the questions in the field. So the question is, what other grape would you compare Diamond to? The only one I can think of is Cayuga, but maybe you have a different answer.
It's so grapey. That's the whole thing, that where it gets that from. But it also has such floral notes to it. And that comes from the Iona, and so to me, it has the nose, just to me personally, of in between like a Pinot Grigio and a Sauvignon Blanc.
I wouldn't disagree, and I'll tell you what, I never knew that until I tasted your wine, because the first thing that came to mind was that it had that sort of Sauvignon Blanc / Pinot Gris kind of feel to it, which completely shocked me because that nose is so grapey when you open it, and I thought, okay, I'm so conditioned to drinking a sweet Diamond, and then you taste it and you're like, wow, it's a real eye-opener.
Right. And, we all know there's different palates for all different wines, and the sweeter Diamond sells more like a Moscato. So when people smell it, I'm like, no, don't judge. Don't judge just by the aroma. It has a really nice grapiness to it, but you're going to be surprised by the finish. And it's a nice, juicy, acidic finish on that grape.
That acidity is just absolutely surprising to me. I just really didn't realize it does have that Sauvignon Blanc kind of feel as soon as you get there, but it's got much bigger aromatics.
Right, and that it doesn't sit on the skins. We just, I press it, and then go right into the fermentation, and then we let it age just for a couple of months. And then we hit the bottle. Make sure it's cold stable, of course. We do harvest it about 19 bricks, and it's an pretty early harvest. This year was good. We harvested the last week of September, believe it or not. And I actually was totally surprised because this was the real first, good harvest of my grapes. And we got about 10 tons per acre, and we've only got 2.5 acres of it. So I got plenty of it to make my sweeter version and my estate version of it as well.
Well, that's a big surprise to me. As I said, I had no idea. The first words, like I said, were Pinot Gris, Sauvignon Blanc, that big sort of sourness that comes off, but in a really lovely, lovely way. And the nose is just out of this world.
Yeah, and I just don't think it has the pithiness that you get from a lot of Sauvignon Blancs either.
Yeah, there's none of the grassiness or anything like that.
Right.
With the other one.
Yeah.
But you do make a sweet version of this as well.
Yes. That's my classic diamond.
And how many cases of this do you make out of your total production?
Well, the first time I only made like 50 to 60 cases, but this production, I'm making 250 cases of it.
Oh, wow. Great. And how was the reception in the tasting room? Because I'm assuming this is a bit of a hand sell in that not too many people have had a dry. I have never had a dry diamond before. So how did that work for you in the tasting room?
Yeah, absolutely. Once people do try it, they said it's something so unique that they've never had anything like it. So you can't call it a Pinot Grigio, you can't call it a Sauvignon Blanc. It's got its own profile completely.
And what foods do you normally recommend with it? Or have you tried with it? Any surprises, any classics?
Well, really nice, like a manchego cheese goes very nice with it, with the nuttiness, with the acidity and everything. But recently we just made a chestnut ravioli with brown butter and sage, which was absolutely, right, yeah, it was really nice. It was really nice with it, so.
Okay, let's see. Okay, well, Peter had some nice things to say about your wine in our little chat, so.
Awesome. Thank you.
Is there anything else that you want to say about your winery or about the wine?
Just the wine, I was really proud of it. It was my very first estate wine, that I decided to try. Like they said before, sometimes when you're a new winemaker, you tend to go, you're apprehensive of trying something that's going to get just the grape itself, because you don't want to come up with the petrol, especially with the Concord part of it and everything. So it was a new adventure for me to do that. I do the meads, of course, which I'm pretty well noted for my mead. And but I wanted to also, break the stereotype that this region and the Niagara region is sweeter wines as well. A lot of fruit wines, a lot of sweeter wines. We have a lot of lovely, lovely dry red and white wines produced in this area.
I was going to say, could you tell me a little bit more about your region where you're at?
It's a Niagara region, I'm on the Lake Ontario Niagara region, but there's also the Niagara Escarpment, right, which has, we've got 22 different wineries now on this in this region, and it seems to be growing. There's, it was noted for the Concord area, but there's very nice Pinot Noir, a lot of Tramanet in this area. Diamond is known, in this area. So there's a lot of different experimental types of hybrids that are grown in this area because of the Lake Ontario doesn't freeze. So you've got the, loss of words here, sorry. It's
the lake effect.
A lake effect, sorry. Thank you for that.
No problem.
Lake effect and the thermal inversions that come through, and they hit the escarpment so that it comes back around, and because the lake doesn't ever freeze and the temperatures stay at a decent, we don't have as hard of a frost. So I'm going to start trying some different patches you know, a few rows here and there to see what goes really well.
Well, by the way, you definitely win the award for the best background compared to the rest of
Oh,
us. So
That's actually my property. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We're going to do a little quick recap for the folks out there, some of whom might have joined us late. Our first wine was the Fulkerson Vincent. Even though it's got a big, dark color, it's a very soft, approachable red. Really easy to drink, great food wine. People are not really familiar, I think, in a lot of ways with Vincent. This is a wonderful wine, nice, easy to drink red wine. Really lovely job, Dan. So really nice. The White Cliff Vineyard, Brad. This is just a super restaurant quality white wine, dry white wine, great food wine. Really love this. Grown in the Hudson River region. Just so happy about that wine. I've known Brad quite a while, so I'm always happy about that. One of the big surprises was the Stony Lonesome Surly. This is just a tremendous surprise. Beautiful, beautiful nose. Again, restaurant quality, dry white wine. It's just spectacular. Just a beautiful, really beautiful wine. Loved the Tramanet, no matter how undersold it was by Peter. I think the rest of the panel loved the wine. And it's got a fabulous nose. Again, really light, really luscious fruit. If you like Rieslings, if you like Gewurztraminers, this is just a spectacular wine. No question. Shocking. I'm going to say that Diamond Estate. Again, I've had so many sweet diamonds. I've had it blended with Niagara and a whole bunch of other things. It's usually used in wines, but this was a shocker. I'm going to say just an absolute shocker. So there you go. Now, do we have any other questions? Okay, so we have a question here for all the panelists. Do you have insights into how best to sell these wines to the public? Why should they think of drinking a hybrid grape wine from New York? Anybody want to start first? Raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just jump in at a very basic level. Areas of the world that have a longer history of making wine have been celebrating their hybrid, and their native varietals with their local foods for hundreds and hundreds of years. So realistically, there's a long history of celebrating the native varietals of your region. And I think that is a good place to start, but certainly also with highlighting the fact that, hybrids and natives don't necessarily mean high sugar content. And so, I think a lot of it is kind of customer education. I think that's a lot of what needs to be done for New York wines in general for some people, but certainly with hybrids and natives on a larger scale. So I think kind of taking the opportunity to highlight the history of native wines with your local food from all over the world, but then just taking the opportunity to talk with customers and maybe offer a little bit of information where they might not, have had quite as much.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, I've always said about hybrids that, I think certainly the East Coast did them a disservice by making so many, sort of sweet or bulk wines out of them. And when you treat vinifera, the hybrids like vinifera using today's current, I hate to say the word technology, but best practices, et cetera, I've been tasting more and more high quality hybrid wines. And they're wines that some people might have a less than positive reception to because they think they're getting something less when in fact these wines deliver on an incredibly high level. Anybody else? Brad, Dan, anybody? Sydney?
I was going to say it's not even focused on hybrid. Let's not even say hybrid wines. Just say good New York wines. I mean, that's what they are. I mean, it's a farm to table. I mean, that's what all the restaurants profess and they're talking about. I'm like, well, we're the ultimate we are actually on the farm. They can come and drink our wines. It's these are from our estates or from our neighbors, or they're right here and they can come to it And I think we show, especially with these wines, that it doesn't matter if they're hybrid, they are very good wines, and they are very drinkable wines, and people should be very happy with drinking this. Or I'll drink my Vidal, I'll drink a Chardonnay, I'll drink a Riesling, I'll drink, you name it. If as long as it's really good, I will drink it. And I think that's what's shown by doing these type of things, is that hybrids can be really, really good wines. It's just a matter of getting people to try them. That's the key, is being able to not even do, like, don't worry about what they're called, just drink this, try this, what do you think? And that's the way we sell them. It's like, don't even worry about the name of them. It's just, here, drink this.
Cindy, you wanted to say something?
I agree entirely with that. And in fact, in the tasting room here, we've stopped using the word hybrid, because even though it's a legitimate term, it seems to convey a compromise of some sort to people who are in the tasting room. So we do not talk about Tramanet or Cayuga, which we also make a lot of, as a hybrid. We talk about it as a classic, regional grape, and leave it at that. And it actually changes the discussion a lot. A regional classic grape says good things. Hybrid, except to winemakers and grape growers, seems to convey something that's not necessarily 100% appealing.
I couldn't agree more, and I think that was certainly some of the things that we were doing at our winery before I left, is that we didn't use the word hybrid at all. Somebody else?
And certainly in the in the food and restaurant industry, when there's such a focus on foods and ingredients that have low impact, organic, locally sourced, haven't been handled as much. Even without mentioning hybrids, but that focus on local, regionally specific grapes, where you can get away with being a little bit more hands-off, seems like an easy selling point. They certainly don't need to be manipulated, or they're more specific for our region. So we can intervene less.
Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Okay, I'm having a little problem with my connectivity. One thing I would say is that I find it interesting that in France there is a movement to go back to some hybrids, and there's a whole documentary about trying to get more hybrids into France, which is in some places illegal, which is hilarious, and the grape farmers there find it less amusing than I do, but it's a wonderful documentary about it. My other obvious irony is that my favorite current apple is a Honeycrisp, which was only delivered in the last, I think, 10 or 15 years, and it's the most popular one in the market. It's a hybrid, but nobody complains about a hybrid apple, but certainly hybrid grapes, everybody just sort of wrinkles their nose, which I find hilarious. So again, I agree with Peter especially. We just talked about the fact that it was a grape we grew, and we talked about our terroir, which is something that Amy was noting here on our side. And I think that's really what it's all about. If that grape grows well, and that's really what it's all about. And I think as long as you're making a good wine, a good quality wine, which all of these are, then that's really what the game is about. And it's selling it like that. I think that's a big part of it. Somebody else also mentioned that sometimes people don't know the type of grape, and that could be a vinifera as well. And the question is, can you name a grape that the wine is closest to engender some kind of familiarity with your wine? And certainly, I certainly found that case to be true as well. But I think that goes for anything. I mean, I've certainly been with just consumers, and they say, well, I've never heard of Petit Syrah, or I've never heard of whatever. And that always goes a long way when you can figure that out. Well, I want to thank all our panelists today. I can't thank you enough. And I want to thank all our guests for who watched. Did we get all your questions? If you have any other questions, please feel free to email them to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation, or you can email me or text me, all except Len. And I just want to say thank you to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation and to these lovely people. 5 terrific wines. I don't care if I don't even want to use the word hybrid anymore. They're just 5 terrific wines. I had a great time doing this today, and I can't thank all of you enough.
I want to nominate you as another, like, propose that you do this again on another topic, because you're such a good kind of panel leader.
Well, I'll be here all week. Try the veal. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
How do we turn this thing
Thank
off?
you.